Hello, thank you for joining us for episode 40 of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Tonight we're focusing on post-menopause and mental health. My name is Neil Parek. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. That's my co-host, Dawn Helmrich Neuburg. And we are thrilled to be here. This is the second of two shows, ostensibly dealing with menopause and mental health. In November, we did a show, it was episode 39, focusing on perimenopause and mental health. And then today we're focusing on menopause and mental health. Dawn, can you share a little bit of background on how we got to doing these shows?
Sure. So I have spent a lot of time on Facebook posting about sort of my journey through perimenopause and post-menopause. And it felt like every time we were doing a show and we had a woman as a guest, menopause just kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And then on show 38, Candace mentioned in the comments that we really needed to do a show on menopause. And boy, was she right. We definitely did. So I'm really excited to do this show today. I think it's just such a topic that's not talked about enough. And I think sometimes women go through this whole like perimenopause cycle without even realizing that they're in perimenopause. And they don't necessarily understand that you have to go 12 months without a period before you're in postmenopause. And it's just a very confusing time. And I'm glad we're focusing on postmenopause today because that's what I'm in. And I've expressed quite often some of the difficulties that I've had with my mental health and post-menopause. So I'm really excited.
And that's one of the things that we learned in our last episode, in particular, defining terms. And we'll have Ellen come on in a few minutes and walk us through that again. But the idea that really the phases are perimenopause, and that's, kind of the phase, the period when, the time when a woman's period starts becoming irregular and you start having, different symptoms. And then when you don't have your period for 12 months in a row, that's menopause. And that's really a point in time. And then post-menopause is everything after that. And that was a learning that we had. And the other thing that I took away, the major takeaway I had from that episode was that the changes to a woman's body during perimenopause are as profound as the changes to a woman's body during pregnancy, which I thought was particularly telling. We'll have a chance to discuss some of these issues a little bit later, and if we have time, there's a New York Times article I'll share with folks, or at least put it in the comments. But before we get into the program, I just want to take a moment to thank two production partners. The show is produced with pro bono support from Digimentors, which I appreciate very much. That's the consulting firm that I work with. But these shows, episode 39 and episode 40, are also being produced in partnership with the National Menopause Foundation. And that's where Dr. Ellen joins us from. And I want to give a quick shout out to a friend and former guest on the show, Pradnya Haldapur, who put us in touch with the National Menopause Foundation. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring on Dr. Ellen Albertson to share a little bit about, kind of some of the background on postmenopause and some of the suggestions she has for women who are dealing with this new phase of life. Ellen, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks, Neil. It's great to be back here. And you did such a great job of explaining perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause. So I don't have to do that, but I'm so thrilled to be here because, perimenopause feels like, this earthquake, but then you get to post-menopause and it's kind of like you've got 20, 30, 40 years ahead of you. And it's kind of like you think about an earthquake and then you've got to kind of pick up the pieces of the town that's just experienced the earthquake or the tsunami. And it's sometimes post-menopause is really treated like the finish line, but for many women, it can be really confusing. There's still hormonal shifts, there's brain changes, there's life stressors. So it's kind of happening at the same time as things like empty nest. You might be having trouble with your marriage. I work with a woman in marriage and perimenopause. A lot of things are very rocky. Maybe you have elderly parents. You might be struggling with some career issues. So there's a lot going on. And in fact, there's also something called a U-shaped happiness curve, which shows that happiness actually dips around age 50 and then comes back up, which is the good news. But if you're in post-menopause and you're feeling like, gosh, I just finished, I hit menopause, what is going on here? The thing I really want you to take away is that you are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. It is totally a normal shift in the female biology and chemistry, and your brain and your body is really recalibrating. And there's so much that you can do in terms of your nutrition, lifestyle, and self-compassion to feel like yourself again and to feel differently. I mean, we're always changing and shifting. And so I like to think about this period as not like menopause and midlife are problems to be solved, but they're sort of portals into a new way of being. If you haven't been taking great care of your body, your brain, your physicality, then things are really could go south. And it's important, not only that you're taking care of your mental health, but also your physical health. So my approach really combines science and soul. So when a client comes to me, we really do a whole holistic assessment. We first look at the body, the mind, relationships, and also even spirituality and purpose and what's going on with career and work, because they all play a part. Your thoughts really are very important. And also, how you're approaching your relationship with yourself, how you're talking to yourself, and how you're even thinking about aging. So, in terms of the science, what happens is, estrogen, progesterone decline. And that changes your brain chemistry. So it changes things like neurotransmitters such as serotonin and GABA. And also a lot of women still experience anxiety, low mood, irritability, sleep problems, all of which it's kind of hard to know if it's the symptoms of the post-menopause that are causing the difficulties with mental health, or if it's the mental health is the issue. And I always encourage people, talk to your doctor, find someone who is trained in menopause medicine, or find a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist who's trained and understands this time of life to try to see, do I treat the hormones? You can still do hormone replacement therapy. Do I want to treat that? Or are we looking at, treating depression? So if you are really experiencing depression, you've kind of lost, your interest in life, and it's continued for weeks, it's definitely time to get checked, because depression is a serious issue, and women at midlife have the highest rate of depression for any group for their age and gender. So just talking about the 4 key areas when I'm working with a client around the body really are nutrition, stress, sleep, and movement. So it's interesting, a lot of women experience weight gain. So they go right into what worked for them in their 20s and the 30s, cutting calories, overdoing the cardio, and this completely backfires because it raises another hormone, which is cortisol, which is the hormone of stress. And cortisol and estrogen come from the same place. So your body's still making a little bit of estrogen, but the cortisol is kind of going to take all of that precursor. So it's super important, first of all, to not skip meals, not this okay, I'm going to skip breakfast, lunch, dinner, be ravenous, and eat and snack in the evening. Don't skip meals. It's super important to have regular meals and snacks. It's important because you want to keep your blood sugar balanced. That can really help with your mood regulation. It's important to make sure to get enough protein. The majority of women that I see in my practice are not eating enough protein. As estrogen is going down and as we're aging, we naturally need more protein. We don't absorb it as well. We don't digest it and assimilate it as well. So you basically want to get around, 1 gram of protein per a kilogram of body weight. I usually tell people, aim for 20, 25 grams per meal and maybe 10, 15 per snack. So you want plenty of protein, you want fiber, and you want healthy fats. Those omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in seafood and nuts and seeds. So have like a protein-rich breakfast. So some, instead of having, I'm going to have coffee and a pastry, or coffee and a muffin, something like a yogurt's really good, or a smoothie that has protein in it. Afternoon, it's great to have, a salad with a source of protein. You also want to make sure to eat a whole food plant-based diet. So the name of the game is also this sort of blood sugar balance, and it's also inflammation. Inflammation is really at the bottom line of chronic diseases, and it's also really impacts mood. So you want to eat more of that Mediterranean diet that we've heard a lot about. So lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of basically eat more plants, eat enough protein, and don't eat a lot of processed foods. And the American diet is actually 70% processed foods, which is mind-boggling. But what the processed foods do is they send your blood sugar level all over the map. And because they're highly processed, so your blood sugar goes way up and then it comes down. They don't have a lot of fiber, and they can also cause inflammation. So again, the diet's pretty straightforward: more plants, more protein, less processed foods. Then it's super important in terms of, learning how to regulate your nervous system. So noticing when you are stressed and struggling, doing things like breath work, maybe going outside and getting a little sunshine and fresh air, doing some movement. We know that exercise is like Prozac for the body. So, but again, not this movement where I'm going to kill myself on the spin bike, but really, doing things you enjoy: walking, dancing, yoga, stretching. And also, if you can fit it in, doing some strength training to keep that muscle mass up, because muscle is metabolically active. So we've covered nutrition, we've covered movement. Sleep is super important. I rarely meet a woman who is going through perimenopause or post-menopause who doesn't have sleep issues, myself including. Of all of my wellness efforts, sleep is definitely the hardest one. So it's super important to have a regular bedtime. So make sure you go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, make sure your room is cool and dark. Even if you're postmenopausal, you can still have hot flashes and night sweats. Alcohol plays a lot of havoc with both mood as well as sleep. So either cut it out or go easy on it. I find, and I don't think we talk about it enough, and there isn't enough research on it, but postmenopausal women and women going through perimenopause seem to have more trouble metabolizing alcohol. So definitely it might help you relax in the evening. You feel like it helps you relax and then maybe sleep, but it's actually doing you a lot of disservice in terms of mood and in terms of sleep. On fewer screens at night. So it's a great idea to turn the screens off about an hour before you go to bed. Do something quiet, take a bath, a shower, listen to music, gentle stretching, read. But getting into really good sleep hygiene is also great, in the morning, to get some direct sunlight. That can really help with your circadian rhythms, a little bit of movement. In terms of stress, you have to figure out what works for you. So I'm a big fan of things like heart math, which are a way to kind of regulate your heart and your emotions and your mind. Breath work is fantastic. Meditating, yoga, find what works for you. It doesn't have to be crazy. Just getting 5 minutes of daylight and fresh air can make a huge difference. And just as a other thing too, it's connection's really important. I think as we get older and our kids aren't in school anymore, sometimes we have trouble making friends, connections. You have to find new things that you want to explore and do. It's super important to do more things that bring you joy. Well, I guess that gets to my final piece, which is self-compassion. So just realizing that you need to shift your inner talk from what's wrong with me or why is this happening to this is hard. I'll give myself an example. I had a tooth removed today. And I was like, oh my God, I should have gone to the dentist earlier. Why is this happening to me? It's like, hey, I'm turning 63. Stuff happens. I'm here for me, hand on heart, hand on belly, deep breaths. And I am here and I'm going to get through it and it's going to be okay. But we know that self-compassion is linked with less anxiety, less stress, less shame, more resilience, a better follow through with healthy habits. We do things and take care of our body because we love ourselves. So yeah, practice self-compassion, do all of these things because you love and care about yourself. And as someone who's been through and a little on the other side, when you really start to do more of what helps you grow, what looking at what's feeding the future self, the woman that I want to be, and less of the things that are taking away and detracting from your future self, it changes everything. So there is hope to really create a future self that is awesome.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ellen. We will come back to you. We're going to hear from Tess, Candace, and then Dawn. But first, what I wanted to do was bring on a couple of comments, folks who are watching, and say hi to our viewers before Tess joins us. So first, I want to say hi to Sudha Parekh, watching from Tampa, Florida. That's my mom. Mom, thank you for watching. And to keep it in the family, my sister is watching from Bellevue, Washington, as well. And as an extension of my family, Jim Neuburg, Don's husband, is watching from that way. Which wall is he on that side? That side of the room? Yeah. One is that Daniel Corrin is watching, saying looking good, happy I was here. Don, is this someone you know?
This is my lifelong friend and someone I consider to be my guardian angel. He's in my book a lot. That's in my book. I think he's named as like my companion, and he was there for me after everything happened to me.
Oh, that's who that was. Okay, I was just saying I didn't recognize the name, and I was wondering if I just didn't catch it. But
no.
Thank you for watching, Daniel. And he's watching from Marin County, California. And he said, let's talk about it, which is good. And then Paula Kiger is watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula, thank you so much for joining us. Paula is a colleague of mine at Digimentors. And one of the comments that my mom shared, so the Parekh, during that difficult time, family members have no idea about mental health issues when women are going through perimenopause and then are post-menopausal. And she agrees that nutrition is very important in this process. Now let's go ahead and bring on Tess Rondo. She'll share a little bit about her experience going through perimenopause into menopause, and I'll let her share her story. Tess, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Well, I feel like I need to start a little bit with my perimenopause journey because I feel like it might not be unique to only me. So at age 34, I started having migraines. I had never had one before. I had had sinus headaches, that kind of thing, but never anything so painful. And I did have an autoimmune disease. I still have it. And so we thought maybe it had to do with that. Maybe it had to do with medications I was on. No one ever mentioned hormonal issues or perimenopause or anything like that to me. And I had 3 different doctors, my specialist, my physician, and my gynecologist. So that continued for years. Then when I was 39, I started dating someone seriously after having been divorced a few years before that. And while we were dating, I started to have these unusual outbursts where things that he did just rubbed me the wrong way. And I had never experienced anything like that either, where, he one time left a small space heater on all day long. And I just was like, it's the end of the world. How could he do that? It's so wasteful. He wasn't even in that room, and just very out of context for me. I'm usually a very forgiving person. So I didn't understand these outbursts, and I had a therapist. I was working with her on mental health issues due to my autoimmune disease and dealing with that. I was diagnosed when I was only 23. So we talked about, maybe it's just the newness of the relationship. Maybe it has to do with, medications. Talk to your doctor, advocate, find out what more you can do. And so we did a battery of tests, and nothing seemed to come up that could explain it. Then finally, at about 39, 40, I was telling my physician about this when I had my yearly physical. And she said, you could be going through early menopause. We should test your hormone levels. And that was the first time now we're talking 5 years, that someone had mentioned that to me, that could be what was happening. And just because I had migraines and some uncharacteristic sort of mental health outbursts and mood swings up and down. And sure enough, my hormones were out of whack. And so I saw my gynecologist, and they said, yes, indeed, we think you have started perimenopause. Migraines are often a first symptom for some women. And that was the very first time I had ever heard that. And why did it take 5 years for somebody to tell me that? I had seen my gynecologist every year, should have maybe have come up. I did talk to him about that. So then once I knew, I started to do a little bit of research, figure out what was going to be next. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that menopause meant you had to be without your cycle for a whole 12 months. I also, at this point, was starting to talk to my significant other about maybe trying to have a child. I don't have any children. And then suddenly my period stopped. And very quickly, that was the one lucky thing for me, is that I did have an easy time in menopause, and that at first my periods widened. I went from every 28 days to every 35, 38, 42 days. And then once I stopped having them, it was 12 straight months without any. And so then I'm postmenopausal, and I had to deal with the fact that, one, I suddenly, within a year and a half, 2 years, everything had changed. Yeah. I had gone from, being a woman dealing with mental health issues and an autoimmune disease to suddenly being postmenopausal at 41. And so it was quite a transition. My relationship did not make it through that. I thankfully had a really great therapist at the time. She was very helpful. But like the doctor was saying, it felt like an earthquake for me. It was a very big, short earthquake. It wasn't one that built up and I knew it was coming. It just sort of suddenly, I didn't know what was happening. Maybe that was a rumble. No one had mentioned to me that I could have rumbles. And then, volcano exploded, and that was it. I am now 51. Since then, I have been able to talk with my friends more about being postmenopausal. We've been able to share our experiences. More people are discussing it. And so I don't feel alone about it anymore. And that's been great. There's still mental health challenges that I'm working out, and doing something like this, I think, is very helpful for me and hopefully for other women and their spouses and significant others. That's sort of my story. I have to continue to deal with my autoimmune disease and the postmenopausal changes that now 10 years in are different. It does change over time, and I have to reevaluate, what I'm going to do at this point with those continued changes.
Yeah. Thanks. You. Thanks so much, Tess.
And I will share for anyone, folks who may have seen episode 39 when we talked about perimenopause and mental health. I knew Lisa, who was our guest on our last show, for more than 30 years. We went to college together. Tess, Lisa, Pam, and I all went to Wesleyan University. And in 30 plus years, Tess and I have never talked about women's health, about menopause, perimenopause, periods, etc. But here we are, not just on the show, but one-on-one earlier today. So I want to thank you for joining the show, Tess, and being willing to have that conversation with us. We'll bring you back in just a few minutes. But first, I want to bring on Candace Sanchez. And before I do that, I want to give a quick hello. Kate Easton is saying, thank you, ladies, for your wisdom and discussion as I move into this period of life. So Kate, thank you so much. Kate's a former guest on the show and a very close friend to several of us. And my mom shares that Tess very nicely and openly talked about her situation. Now we'll bring on Candace Sanchez, and I'll have her on screen for this because Candace is very special to both Dawn and I. We would not be doing this show if it wasn't for Candace. I co-hosted season 3 of Unspoken Conversations with Candace. This was back in 2023, so we're going back a little bit now. And it was a show dedicated to male survivors of sexual abuse. And we spent the year, mental health kept coming up as a topic. And I had not yet talked openly about my own mental health issues. After we finished the show, the season, I said, okay, for my next act, I'm going to see if I can, push myself to talk about mental health, and asked Dawn if she'd be a guest on my show. And Dawn, you said,
I'd love to be a guest, but I would also love to co-host.
just exactly what I said to Candace when she asked me to be a guest on her show.
Mhm.
And a year, almost 2 years later, the fact that we're doing a conversation about perimenopause and menopause, I never would have dreamed that we would have gotten to this point. But Candace, thank you so much. Thank you for all the support you've given us. Um, you have a particularly interesting story in terms of how you came to be post-menopause. Can you share a little of that?
Yeah, so I will just like to say I'm a student of this show, this Shining Light on Shadows, because the last episode really helped me better understand like the definitions and what things meant. And I haven't been educated. I mean, I've been having women's health issues, I feel like my whole life, like ever since I became a young mom at the age of 19. So I just want to say thank you to Dawn and to Neil for both having this show, and then just how mental health now is intersecting with menopause, and when you're going through this life change, right, and you already have mental health issues, which for me, and then also I was abused as a child, sexually assaulted, right, for between the age of 5 to 50, unpacking the trauma, it just kind of crept up. And so unpacking all of that and then connecting the dots. So again, being a student of the show, last week's episode really helped me to kind of go back and journey map kind of what I went through. So I remember, Neil and Dawn, like we talked a little bit about my journey with just having health issues, precancer cells, my OBGYN just kept treating me. And I was a young mom and dealing with these precancer cells. I was always having heavy periods, and maybe TMI for the audience, but I'm just being very real and honest with what I was experiencing. And then it just got to the point where my provider, my OBGYN says, we really should start looking at you having a hysterectomy, because my periods they were horrible. I literally passed, unfortunately, a cyst. I felt like I was having a baby. It was the size of a grapefruit. I mean, I'm being explicit and kind of describing what the pain I was experiencing. And again, my OBGYN really didn't talk about like the perimenopause or talk about my hormone levels or anything. It was just something I felt like I was just going through. And then again, dealing with your trauma, going through life. And then finally in 2014, I had a hysterectomy, a partial. So my ovaries are still in, but I had a partial hysterectomy. So something happened within my body. That was in 2014. After 2014, I felt like, oh my goodness, I can rediscover myself. I have more energy. I feel much better. And honestly, the hysterectomy, when the provider, my OBGYN, Dr. Pei, I love him to death. He took good care of me. There were other health issues happening because I wasn't really addressing the issues. I was having chest pain, palpitations in my chest. I was having like back pain. I was just so uncomfortable. But once I had the hysterectomy, all of that went away. I felt like I had a whole new life. But then COVID hit. And then 2020, my mental health went in full gear. And then I didn't realize menopause. I was having memory loss. I was having brain fog, hair loss, fatigue. I was stressed. And then COVID, what did it do to me? It isolated me, and my depression and my anxiety, my panic attacks, that all started to set in. And I really thought I was going crazy. But I think the biggest thing that it was hard, and I mentioned this to Dawn and Neil and to Ellen, was that the idea of suicide just kept coming and popping up in my head. And that's really hard for me to say out loud. But again, I lived in silence a lot of my life with my trauma, my child abuse, and what has happened to me, where I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm speaking truth, I'm speaking the unspoken, because I know I'm not the only one. And I know it has a lot to do with not the trauma, the mental health, but then also the menopause, right? I felt like I was going crazy. mood swings, being in a new relationship, trying to trust someone, being vulnerable. Um, but I have to just be very thankful that because I've been healing from my trauma and just understanding my mental health, I had tools in my toolbox to help me deal with menopause. So while I would never do the act, the fact that I just thought of it, there was a lot of shame in that, and it's very hard for me to still express that. But I know I'm not alone. And I'm just so grateful that we are having this conversation. I'm grateful that I can be here just to kind of explain, I'm taking off all my other hats and I'm just being Candace Sanchez today, the one who's been dealing with her mental health and her menopause and the intersect and how that's affected me in my life. And I'm not going to be ashamed of it. I'm just going to say it out loud. And Dawn, thank you for being vulnerable on Facebook, because without you doing that, you were actually writing everything I was feeling, but I wouldn't post it. And every time you did, I commented. I gave you a big old care and a big old hug, because I'm like, Dawn, oh my God, this is exact. I'm not crazy. And then guess what? I wasn't alone. I felt like, you know what? If Dawn is going through it and I'm going through it, I know I'm not alone. I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. I mean, we've supported each other on our regular, our healing journeys overall. This is just another added layer. And so, when Ellen was talking about the food, nutrition, taking care of yourself, I have tools in my toolbox. So I journal. I have the faith. I have my faith. And so I've really leaned on that. I've now just started yoga. I do acupuncture. I go get my mani-pedis, I get a massage. So I am taking care of my whole self. WHOLE, like the whole thing, mind, body, spirit, to really get me through this phase of menopause of my life. It is hard. And nobody even talked to me about what postpartum was, but I'm sure I experienced that. But to know that we're now having these conversations and that we're being open and honest about the things that we go through. Dawn, I'm a student. Neil, I'm a student of this podcast, of this Shining Light on Shadows, and I'm so grateful that you are allowing us to talk about the intersect of mental health and menopause. So that was a little bit of my story. I hope that kind of helped kind of set the tone, just for what I experienced and what I was going through. But I think, again, that suicide ideations was huge for me to even say it out loud. And I'm much better. Like I said, I'm in therapy. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I'm an advocate to take care of yourself. So I know I'm not alone, and I just wanted to speak my truth. So thank you for allowing me to do so.
Thank you so much, Candace. And as we talked about, I have experienced suicidal ideation myself, and I know how terrifying that is to even know that you're thinking those things when you're like, well, I know better than this. And I don't think there is anything to know better, right? Like those are just thoughts that can happen when we're in, really difficult situations. So I'm proud of you for saying it out loud. I think that's important and very helpful for, I think, our audience members too.
Because what are the stats? And Dawn, I know you're all about data, right? So I'm sure the stats will prove that the strong ones, the ones you least expected, would do the act. And I have seen, when we see things on like Hollywood, right? You see like Miss Americas or somebody in Hollywood that does it. And then you're sitting here watching the news about, TMZ on Hollywood, and they're covering the story. And you're like at home thinking, well, I thought of that, or I've thought of it. But I just know I would never, because thank God I have tools in my toolbox. My faith, very strong in my faith, faith of a mustard seed. I know God is working in my life, and I believe in that. So when I want to turn, into that, I don't know, that pity party or that I let that, I'm like, no, not today, Satan. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I get up and I stomp him to the ground. So
good for you.
Well,
yeah.
In fact, we did a whole episode on suicidal ideation back in October, I think it was last year. We had a guest from New York, a CBS News anchorwoman, Cindy Hsu, talked about her experience. She actually did try to commit suicide, but she woke up in the hospital. And that's another kind of example of what the show has meant to us. When we first started the show, I thought it was a big deal that I was sharing that I suffered from anxiety and occasional depression, and I had never up to that point told anyone that I saw a therapist. I was too embarrassed by that. And I remember telling Dawn in one of our earliest meetings that, as far as mental health is concerned, there was one time I had this idea. It wasn't really a formed thought, but it was ideation of there were two incidents. One when I imagined myself stepping in front of a bus, and another when I imagined myself jumping off a bridge. But I told her this was like we started the show in February, so it must have been January or March, like really early on. But I don't think I'm ever going to talk about that on the air. That's something that I don't think I can share with folks. And we actually did a whole episode. So Candace, we hear you and we understand how difficult this is. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for allowing me to share. Appreciate it.
So now it's my pleasure to interview Dawn Helmrich Neuburg. Dawn, for the next 7 minutes or so, you are no longer a co-host. You're a guest on the show, as your label has now been changed. Can you tell us, you are in post-menopause, and that's one of the things that I'll share in terms of our learnings from the show. Originally thinking that it was menopause, but menopause is just that moment in time. You're in post-menopause. As Candace mentioned, you've written about it on Facebook. You've expressed your consternation, I guess is the easiest way to put it. Can you talk a little bit about some of the emotions you've had around this stage of your life?
Yeah. So, like everything everybody said to this point is so validating because, you know, I experienced the confusion, the brain fog, the like not being able to form words, like sitting in meetings in a very professional setting at a very professional job and really struggling with getting sentences out. And a lot of times I was like the oldest person sitting at these tables, and I was so embarrassed because I couldn't think straight. And none of these people who were sitting there had, you know, or I thought had those kind of experiences. And I didn't really realize that it was perimenopause for a really long time. So it hurt my mental health. And I talked to that's a lot of what I was talking about when I was talking on Facebook. Now, post-menopause, and I'll say Dr. Ellen, it has really just been a godsend for me in terms of my way of thinking about post-menopause, because, you know, like I was viewing it as like, well, I'm like on my way to death, you know, like I was like, you know, my looks have always just kind of been important to me. And like, you can even see in the camera, like this side of my hair is not as long as this side of my hair because my hair's been falling out. And you know, I literally would have like a beard if I didn't have a pair of tweezers, like things on my body that had never appeared before have suddenly in the past year and a half appeared. Lines and wrinkles that weren't there before that, you know, I try to cover up with makeup, and you know, a menopause belly that I had never had before. I'd always been relatively fit. Now I can't seem to lose a pound to save my life. These are all things that and I know it sounds really, really vain. And I get that. And I take ownership of that I put a lot of stock in the outside of my body. And I think Ellen has kind of helped me to understand that I need to take care of the inside of my body, and hopefully the outside of my body, I'll start to love who that person is becoming. Because I really struggle with that. I am not a good self-love person. I never have been. And, you know, I've had a lot of trauma in my life. And I think that that's part of the reason why I really struggle with the self-love. But every time Ellen talks about self-compassion, I delve in just a little bit further and a little bit further, knowing that that if I can master that, it's going to help my mental health exponentially. I also lost my job 4 months ago, and that has been like, I was at the same workplace for 20 years, and my identity was like attached to that. And good, bad, or indifferent, really realizing my self-worth, and that, I'm really smart, and that some place is going to be really lucky to get me, if I can just like get in front of them and show them, what my worth is. So for me, really dealing with the physical aspects of post-menopause has been my hardest struggle. I still get a little brain fog, but it's not as bad. I get hot flashes sometimes, but they're not as bad. I get night sweats sometimes, but they're not as bad. And I always say the best part of post-menopause for me so far is that I don't have to worry about getting a period on vacation. Like that's like,
Sure.
that's the thing. It's like, woo, yay. Like I don't have to worry about that anymore. So
small consolation.
Yeah,
right?
I don't have to plan my life around, when I'm going to have the worst period of my life. So that, I think that to me is the place that I'm at, and the things that Dr. Ellen talked about, are really crucial, and they sound so simple, right? They sound like these very easy, tangible things. And at the same time, they feel so overwhelming and so daunting. And so I think one of the things that I learned from the last show is taking things a bite at a time, right? Like figuring out one thing to do, focusing on that one thing and doing that one thing. And I too, I'm a horrible sleeper, just horrible. I can't regulate my sleep. I'm often up every hour on the hour. I think I said last time, my Fitbit yells at me all the time, and tells me how poor my sleeping patterns are. So yeah, I feel everything that everybody has said, and it does make you feel like you're just not alone, when other people are sharing that they had similar experiences as you, which is why I think it's so great that we're doing this.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dawn. Appreciate that. We will bring back our other guests in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to share a couple of comments that have come in. Amy Parak Mehta, watching from Bellevue, Washington. She's also my sister. All of your contributions are inspirational and validating, referring to our speakers. Thank you, Amy. And we also have a comment from Elizabeth Lang, rather. Your mind, body, and soul have always been beautiful. Thank you for helping others through this journey. Dawn, is Elizabeth a friend of yours? I know she's watching on your Facebook page.
Yes, she's somebody that I actually went to grade school with. So,
oh wow, that's great. That's great.
You,
and then we have another comment from Pamela Stumpo, my wife, who very selectively watches the show. She says, this is an important topic. Great job, everyone, especially my good friend, Tess. Thank you for being on the show. So, Pam, thank you for watching. She watched the last episode we did with on perimenopause with our friend Lisa as the guest. And I know that these are topics that are really important. It's one of those things we talked about, right? That these are conversations that are sometimes had with spouses and partners, often between girlfriends, but not in a public space, and certainly not in a professional setting or in a with folks. I know in reaching out to people for being on the show, I found myself asking, people, former guests or people that I could say, hey, we're doing a show on X. Are you in perimenopause or are you post-menopause? And actually having a conversation around that, which was very interesting. So thank you, everyone, for your support. What we'd like to do is to bring back our guests now. And Dawn, I'm going to keep you in the guest mode. Certainly, you can jump in if you need to. But let's go ahead and bring back Dr. Ellen Albertson, Tess Rondo, and Candace Sanchez. Um, excuse me. And I want to just open it up to a general conversation. You heard a little bit about everyone's experiences, and Ellen, as you started with some of the suggestions for taking care of yourself, I want to turn to Tess first, if I may. Um, are there specific things that you're doing? I know you have a range of different health issues that you're dealing with, and some of them flare up from time to time. Are there specific things that you find helpful for you in this phase?
Yes, walking definitely helps me. I'm a small business owner, and one of the things that I do is I'm a dog walker. And so, with talking with my therapist, we've decided that even if I don't have dog walking, I'm going to try to stick to that walking schedule instead of it being an off day. So like most Fridays, I actually don't have a morning dog walk, but now I'm going to get up and walk by myself. Even in the winter, since when I am walking a dog, I just bundle up and I go. So I'm trying to work that out so that I keep that going as a daily thing rather than just when I'm walking dogs. Another thing that I've done in the past that I would like to get back to is doing yoga. That always was really helpful for me when I was first going through menopause and being postmenopausal. And finally, just talking to my friends. Like I'm very lucky. Neil's wife and our good friend Lisa, who was on last week, and my good friend Jane and some other folks. I've just decided to be bold and start to tell people I'm postmenopausal and I'm dealing with this. And I've gotten good feedback from people. You know, there's definitely some who feel like they'll quickly answer my question, but they don't want to go into it. But they don't seem overly bothered that I asked them the question. It's just not something they want to have a long conversation about. But I'm finding that most women are much more open to discussing that now. And I'm getting a lot out of that because, as Candace mentioned, you know, it's very easy to feel like you're by yourself and you're the only one going through this. And, you know, we know logically that that's not the case, but to actually hear other women say, oh yeah, I remember when I was perimenopausal, or I remember my menopause journey. And I do have friends who are older and went through it before me. And so that has been super helpful to me. And now I'm with my therapist, I'm trying to focus on what else can I do? You know, as I'm in a new phase with the postmenopausal journey, you know, I'm trying to get back to some habits that were helpful in the past and try to find new things and just explore, like try new things, go back to things that, you know, worked before. And that's kind of where I'm at. Movement is easy for me. Working on sleep is harder. And I've got to figure out how to get back to, you know, having a better routine for that.
Yeah. I hear everything that you're saying, Tess. And I too, when I started posting on Facebook about menopause, I've always been somebody who, if you don't like it, scroll past it. It's none of your business.
Yeah.
You know, like I've just always had that attitude because, like, it's my Facebook page. I'll do what I want on it. If you don't like it, like, go away. Right. You know, and so when I started posting about this, I was pleasantly surprised by how many women were like, oh, I hear you, or oh my gosh, this really resonates with me, or I would get instant messages from a lot of my friends that were going through it, saying, I don't really want to say this on Facebook, but like, have you experienced this? Is this happening to you this way? So for me, I mostly positive. And the naysayers, there were a couple of guys that I went to grade school with that were like, you are an oversharer. And I said, click, goodbye. Like, I haven't seen you since grade school. If you don't like it, too bad, So yeah, that was that I really found that was really helpful to me, that connection piece, being able to connect with people who were going through the same things that I was going through was really important.
I took so many notes from Ellen and Tess when both of you were speaking. Again, like I said, I feel like I'm a student while I'm, on this episode. It's like I'm, writing all these notes of things that I'm listening and learning just about my health and how I need to continue to take care of myself. And then Dawn, like I think you touched on the whole self-love, self-compassion, and just having that mindset and just getting rid of the negative thoughts, right? Because that's what it is. It's the negative, it's that inner critic that's just tearing you apart. And we are always our worst critic. And, again, like I talk about, I wear many hats, and, I'm a Thrive coach. I've gone from being a victim to a survivor to a thriver. Dawn, you're a thriver. It's just like, for me now, it's all about, okay, I got to make sure my mind is right. And now I know, like, if I go down that negative path, like, instantly I know I can be better. So if I have to go take a nap, or if I had to just shut down and, screen time, or just not looking at social media sometimes, I think those are just good practices that anybody can use. But for me, during this phase, doing the work, you got to do the work. And even in the menopause, you got to do the work to just make sure you're taking care of you, because you are the most important person. If you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else.
Yeah, Dr. Ellen, I loved when you said hand on my heart and hand on my belly. Like, I as soon as you did that, I just like felt this like whole like deep breath in, deep breath out. Like, and when you said, like, even you have to remind yourself, like with your dentist appointment today, like to keep talking to yourself and keep, giving yourself that self.
I would say, and thank you for your kind words. I'm so glad I always hear if I'm having an impact. I think that's a piece for all of us, of just part of our suffering is here to help other people who are going through the same thing and finding, meaning in the suffering. And just a couple of things I wanted to, just to add is self-compassion. It's a practice, and it's like going to the gym, and it builds over time, and it takes a while to see the brain shifts of someone who, also went high performing, more degrees in the thermometer, perfectionism, self-criticism, and people pleasing. It definitely works over time, but it's not instantaneous. And one thing I wanted to say, well, I want to say to you, Dawn, too, is your worth has nothing to do with your accomplishments, or you are worthy just because you are, and taking that in. And also, as we're talking about this, and I'm hearing all of what you're all doing, which is awesome, but not to treat yourself like a self-improvement project. Right? It's like, my body's my partner. Like, how do I treat my partner? And I think sometimes we feel like I got to do more. I got to work harder. Find those things that really work for you. Explore who you are. And I just, especially as we're looking at this sort of new year, I'm really theming a lot, with people I'm working with and my social, going to 2026, is think about that future self, whether that's journaling, whether that's vision boarding, like thinking about who is she? And how do I start feeling like her now? Like my future self gets 8 hours of sleep a night. And my future self loves what she sees in the mirror, and my future self, then I want to pick up what Candace was saying about thoughts. We have like 60,000 thoughts a day. Some are positive, some are negative, and some are neutral. It's not like you have to push the negative ones, but you notice, and you go like, oh, you get this observer and say, oh, that's interesting. The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. You do not need to believe your thoughts. You don't need to beat yourself up if you have a negative thought. And one other thing I wanted to say too, because you mentioned kind of that suicidal thing too, is when you're having a good day, this is what I tell clients all the time, write down the good day. It's so powerful to, like, when you're having a beautiful day, take it in and write it down. So when you have that bad day, you can take it out and you say, my life is great. Like I'm just having, like I have muddy days all the time. And I tell myself when I'm having, because I have low moods too, don't make hard decisions today. Take that nap. Take it easy on yourself. So much of self-compassion is taking it easy on yourself, but also there's this fierce self-compassion, which is that mama bear where you advocate for your health. You advocate at work. You want to thrive, like Candace was saying, and do more, but it's not just about being more, because you're okay just as you are and you're worthy. It has nothing to do with how you look or how much you accomplish.
It's really interesting you say that, because I was just thinking in my head, like I have this mentality that if I think the worst of something, then if it doesn't happen, it makes me feel better, right? And yet all of those like negative things that I think, like I'm not going to get this job because, I'm not qualified, right? Or I'm not as qualified as this other person. I think for me, it's trying to flip that and say, you know what? I killed that interview. I am going to get that job. But I think part of it is I'm so afraid of the rejection that I'll feel if this negative thing that I'm afraid is going to happen happens. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but
I would say two things. First of all, when you feel that way, you give yourself self-compassion. That's how we practice. Like, oh, wow, I'm scared that I'm going to get rejected and that hurts. And I'm giving myself compassion, not to make it go away just because it hurts. And then just to bring in a little bit of the neuroscience, we have a reticular activating system. So that's kind of the part of our brain that's always trying to align things with our self-concept. And so when we have this idea that, I'm no good and I'm going to fail, well, that's what we see. Like I remember when I was, super easy example, I wanted to buy a Portuguese water dog. I had never seen a Portuguese water dog. And all of a sudden, Portuguese water dogs were everywhere. But your brain doesn't take in all of everything. It would just be overwhelming. It focuses on the things that are in alignment with where you're coming from. And so if you have the sense that I know I'm good, I know the right job is going to come along, and I'm just going to keep myself open to that, while still holding yourself because the rejection hurts, then you see those opportunities. So it's you're either looking for, and most people are looking for danger. It's like 80% of our actions are triggered to avoid something we don't want. But you can flip that and say, you know what, most of what I want to be doing, this is sort of future self. My future self is acting on things that I want to do to actualize my future, to be my own authentic self-expression. So you're getting there, girl.
Little at a time.
Ellen, as we approach the top of the hour, and since Dawn is not the co-host anymore, I'm going to take the privilege of going a few minutes past the hour. She's usually fierce about making sure we end on time, but this conversation is too good. One of the things I want to ask you about, you had some thoughts on New Year's resolutions and kind of what role they can play for people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions because New Year's resolutions always feel like you're punishing yourself for something you did, right? You had too much fun over the holidays, you ate too much, you drank too much, you were hard on yourself. I'm much more a fan of intention setting and bringing in affirmation. So, I intend to be healthier in the new year. I intend to move my body. I intend to be kinder to myself. And then from that, you can create an affirmation like, I intend to be kinder to myself. I talk to myself the way I would a good friend. So that's kind of an affirmation that goes ahead. Because I feel like that whole, I'm so not a fan of quick fix. And it's like when you get on social media, everyone's like, how do I lose 10 pounds in 2 days, right? How do I, because that's what sells. But there's the deep change, the transformational work takes time. But part of that work is when we're doing it, we start to change as a human. I think some of that suffering and things that we go through, that's how the universe, that's how God hones us, right? I know Candace can attest to that, right? Everything I've been through, even my mouth, I'm looking at my face going like, God, girl, you're puffy. But, the New Year's resolution, I would say, so if you're listening, and the research really shows is that people don't stick to them. I think a lot of you have touched on is this idea of creating habit stacking. So like, for example, like with using Tess as an example, or I use clients all the time, you got your sneakers right by the bed. You've got your dog leash right out there. You tell yourself when you're going to bed, I'm going to wake up, put on my sneakers. I'm going to go out for that walk. I've got my bag packed where I'm just going to always have a piece of fruit, handful of almonds in my bag, and I'm going to, or yogurt, so I'm going to get away from that Diet Coke and cookie at 3:00 in the afternoon. So it's a big flip when you're doing this from this place of self-love and reverence for yourself, and not because you're beating yourself up because you failed somehow. That's the big piece of self-compassion, is this common humanity. We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's part of the human condition. If we can learn from our mistakes, they don't keep happening. But to answer your question, I think New Year's resolutions are not the way to go with the new year. It's like really, get a coach, get somebody who can like hold you accountable, or do it with a friend, and create slow habit stacking habits. There's this great book out there called Atomic Habits, which shows just tiny little changes, like just having a glass of water. I can't tell you how many women at midlife don't drink enough water. Being dehydrated creates anxiety. It makes you want to eat when you're really thirsty. These tiny little things are huge.
Thank you so much for going into that detail. You'll, I think, be happy to know that for our January episodes, we're going to be pushing our first episode. Instead of the second Thursday of the month, it'll be the third Thursday, just with the way the holidays fall. So January 15th, we'll come back, and we'll actually be talking about New Year's resolutions, managing expectations in the new year. And really along those lines, Ellen, we're still working on finalizing our guest and panel. We have a couple people that we've reached out to. But January 15th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, managing expectations in the new year. What was interesting for me in hearing you talk about your thoughts on resolutions is, and to bring this full circle, my understanding is that the experience that women go through in perimenopause is actually similar to the symptoms around ADHD. And I was diagnosed with ADHD last year about this time. That was the part of my mental health journey, is I found out that it wasn't anxiety and depression, but it was actually ADHD that was causing these issues. And everything you were just describing in terms of habit stacking and noting when you do something right and kind of giving yourself credit for that is actually, there are things that the coach that I work with on ADHD has talked about. So she's going to be joining us. I have a friend of mine that has also done some work around New Year's resolutions, why they don't stick. So we're going to delve into this in the new year. I know Dawn has some strong feelings about New Year's resolutions as well. Would you like to preview that real quickly, Dawn?
I think they're silly. I like the idea of intentions. I've set New Year's resolutions for myself. I don't think I've ever followed through on any of them ever in my entire life. And they really set you up to feel bad about yourself. Because you're saying that you're going to do something and you do it for a little while and then you stop, and then you feel like a horrible human being because you don't have the discipline or the resolve or whatever it is to complete what you said. And I think anything that sets you up for failure is just not a smart idea. It's just not. We got enough of those going on without saying, like, I'm going to do this and I'm giving myself this window of time to do it in, and if it doesn't happen, then I didn't accomplish it. So yeah, I'm not big on New Year's resolutions.
And I'll just add to that, willpower is also really overrated. Like willpower, the research around willpower, especially if it's around nutrition, if you're hungry, whatever it is that you're looking to want to accomplish, your willpower goes south. So, yeah. But I love what you said about not beating yourself up.
Tess, you want to jump in on New Year's resolutions?
Yes, I think what people forget is that you have a whole year. Like for some reason, we've gotten into this mindset that your resolutions are the first month, that you have to like lose the 20 pounds in the first month. And I'm not saying that's a good resolution to have, but as an example, my therapist used to talk about intentions just like the doctor is. And one of the things that she thought was important was that before you make any intentions is to take some time and do like a 3-step thing where you reflect on your year that you just passed. Then you think about what themes you want in your life, what's something new you want in your life, or what do you want to keep going forward? Oh, I realized I made a lot of lasting relationships this past year after I moved. I want to keep that theme going and keep these relationships going. And so you maybe pick that as an intention. And then you sit and you reflect on those intentions, and you remember that you have a whole year, and that it's not just a month, that you need to get that all done in a month.
Yeah.
That was a really good experience for me, thinking about the new year.
I think
Candace, any thoughts?
practicing the attitude of gratitude all the time, not just during a month, not just when you're having a bad day. Which is why I hired a life coach back in 2014, and then I became a life coach, but rebranded my business as a Thrive coach. And the Thrive actually has principles behind the word because it is a mindset, and I talk about thriving with the divine design state of mind. And I do journaling, writing, being creative, vision boards. I feel there's so many things that you can do to manifest positive structure in your life. Because you're always a work in progress. Like sometimes you're a work in mess. I love that from Ted Lasso, but I got that from Ted Lasso, but I just a prog mess, right? So sometimes I'm messy, but sometimes I'm progressing. So it's all good, but it's actually being able to understand the why and then have the tools in your toolbox to do something about it.
So one thing that I'll share, this idea of having resolutions and kind of setting, whether it's an intention or whether it's a traditional resolution, and then either meeting it or not meeting it, and then maybe shifting and kind of setting a different goal. To a certain extent, depending on how extreme it is, but for some people with ADHD, that's a Tuesday. It's a constant process of reinvention and reformulating and having a new, okay, I'm going to do XYZ, and it, either it happens or doesn't happen, or you can't stick with it. And then a week later, okay, I'm going to do it a little differently here. So figuring out a different way of setting that goal for yourself, of setting that kind of North Star. I agree. I think the whole thing around New Year's resolutions is overdone. We all need a different way of thinking about it. And what I'm hoping is that for people coming out of this discussion, both for women who are going through perimenopause or who are now in post-menopause, that we're giving you some tools, some suggestions on a different way of thinking about the situation that you're in. And if people take that away from the show, I'll definitely think that we did something good. We might be able to do the same thing around resolutions in January. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. And we'll ask our guests to stay in the studio right after we go off the air. But again, we are usually live the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. We will not have a show on Christmas because I'm assuming most people will have something else to do, other people to be with. And if you're not celebrating Christmas, you might be at a Chinese restaurant that evening. So that's for some of my friends from the Bay at Wesleyan. Hope you have a good few weeks. We know that the holidays can be stressful, so let's focus on self-compassion, as Ellen reminded us several times today. It really can be applied in any situation. And we hope to see you back in the new year for the rest of our shows. We're going to be going into year 3. Dawn, is it really year 3 of Shining Light on Shadows? Yeah. So we're getting up there in terms of our episode count, and just want to thank everyone for their support, and thank our guests again, Tess Rondeau, Candace Sanchez, and Dr. Ellen Albertson, and our fourth guest, Dawn Helmrich Neuburg. If she's still a guest. Thank you, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.